Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Summer of Me. I am in my feels today. I don't know what it is. Mercury's in Gatorade. Something's happening. I have just been like emo. I don't know what's going on. But our podcast episode is a little emo today anyways, so we're just going to run with it. If I shed a tear, just say a blessing. Take a shot. I don't know what to say. All right. So today's episode is called So You're Getting a Divorce. I get so many DMs, Q&As, text messages, phone calls, that a lot of people are like, "Oh my God, my husband wants a divorce," or "I feel like I'm in a separation. I have an impending divorce." And first and foremost, rewind really quickly. I didn't actually expect in my life to become like the person that people reach out to when they get a divorce, but I will say when I entered into this phase of life, I was like, holy shit, who do I talk to? Who do I know that's been divorced? Because like that feels like the only people that are qualified to walk you through something that of that magnitude is like, well, if you've been through it. And I actually like had a couple people in my life that became very close in that part of my life because they had been through this and were able to walk through it with me. But one of the things I felt in that whole thing, and really one of the catalysts of starting this podcast was like, I felt alone. Like, how do I get through this? What do I do? Like, what's next? And part of it was like, I didn't want to have to make decisions. I wanted people to tell me exactly what to do and how to get through it. And that was just like a pipe dream. That's not that was not a reality. That's not something that somebody can do for you. But I had people come alongside me and hold my hand and be like, it's okay. It's okay. You're going to get through it. You're going like one foot in front of the other. This is not going to kill you. People don't die by divorce, although it feels like you're going to die. And I just aside from those small handful of people, I would like look online, and I've told you guys this before. I would research. I would try to figure out like, what do I do? Help! I'm going through a divorce. Like, help! I'm getting a divorce. I don't know how to handle this. And at the end of the day, I think it becomes a little bit about just like, how do I push through the hard? How do I push through something that feels so insurmountable? And you're kind of fucked. Like, you don't have any choice. You have to go through this. I mean, obviously there's people that like get separated and they get back together or whatever. But like, if you're at the place where you filed for divorce and you're in the thick of it and you know you want this, like, but you'd like to just circumnavigate and like not deal with all the shit in between, like, you have to figure out like, how do I get through this? And I learned a lot. I learned so much. I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about people in my life that I maybe thought were there for me, or that I didn't know were there for me. I learned about just community. I learned about like our culture and like the expectations of divorce, and just like it was such a growing and learning experience for me, but it was also so hard and so dark, and every day felt just ugly. Every day felt scary. Every day felt daunting. And there were definitely like, obviously there was moments in there of like glimmers of hope and like little laughable moments. I have 5 kids. Of course, there was like some joy mixed in with this process, but I look back at that time in my life and I'm like, gosh, it was just heavy and dark. And so first and foremost, if you are listening to this and you're going through that, I just want to like offer my empathy that like, it's okay. It's hard and it's ugly and it's painful, and like, you're not alone. Like it feels like you're alone. But like, people have gone through this before and they've come out of it, and you are going to do the same thing. But like, I'm really fucking sorry because it hurts and it's just painful. So that, like, first and foremost, I feel like, people are out there and it's like, I'm so happy I'm on the other side. It's like, yeah, but like, you're not addressing like the pain and the heartache and just like the strife that you go through with that. So that's first and foremost. I am going to like gear this whole podcast towards like the experience of divorce, but I think that a lot of these things I want to talk about can apply to like pushing through the heart of anything, whether it is, they say like divorce is like second to, I think, losing a child, is like one of the hardest things that you could ever go through, along with death. Like, divorce is one of those things. It's a death of what you thought your life was going to be. It's the death of a family. It's the death of like your hopes, your dreams. Like, I don't know, that sounds like live, laugh, love, but it like really is like, it is the end of so many things, and it can create beautiful beginnings. But like, who the fuck has time to think about that when you're knee deep in all of this stuff? So feel free to apply to other areas of your life, but this is kind of geared, like, this is just sort of framed around my experience in my divorce. I try to, when I go through things, figure out how I can either deduct some logic out of it, or figure out like some coping mechanisms, or what can I teach people moving forward? How can I take this and make it a digestible lesson for somebody? And it's just always how I've approached things. And I do this with my kids. I do this with my relationships. Like, it's just the way my brain has worked. And so when I was going through my divorce, I didn't cognitively think of all these things, but I journaled incessantly. I was constantly like writing things down, making notes, just like expressing my feelings on paper. And I go back and I read it all the time, because I feel like, not only for like the sake of this podcast, like to put myself back in that position and be like, what was I going through? I mean, when I tell you it was dark, every moment felt vivid, because I was in such a dark place that like it was so memorable. And so I go back through these, and I want to put myself back in that position to hopefully help somebody that is currently sitting in that position. We had an apartment at the time, and I would take the elevator down in the apartment, and I was so rail thin because I couldn't eat. I couldn't even, the thought of food was like nauseating. And some people are eaters in stress. I'm like a non-eater in stress. It just like, I'm like, I don't even need this to survive. I don't know, like. And so I would I would wear my bike shorts, and I would try to go to the gym that was like at our apartment building. And I remember like I would just subconsciously walk outside. There was a pool out there and like a lawn chair. And I would sit in this lawn chair, and I would talk on the phone to either my mom or like a best friend, or I would scroll Instagram, scroll Pinterest, and I would Google and like try to figure out like, how do I get through this? And I would just sit and I would sob in this lawn chair. And, the lawn chair like by the pool, this was also like not in the heat of summer. So like people weren't out there, like it was cold. I would wear my sweats, and I would just sit there, and I would try to like figure out what like process. And I remember like that lawn chair was like where I sat and like had a telehealth appointment with my doctor to get on Prozac. It was where I like gave my mom all the passwords to my emails so that I could like stop checking my emails and have like a mental breakdown every time. It was where I like made a dating profile. Like that lawn chair was like a crucial like spot in my like divorce journey. It was like my processor. It was like where I would sit and my intention was always like, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to move my body. I'm going to do these things. And like, yeah, fucking right. Like, no, you're not. Like, you're going to go sit in this lawn chair, and you're going to I would order like Panda Express, or like, and I would just melt, and I would just wither away in this lawn chair. But it was, I don't know, like it was just became my place. And so anyways, I try to put myself back in that chair, and like, what were the things I was feeling? So I kind of tried to break this down in terms of like, if you're going through this process, here are some of the things that like I think beg for awareness. And that's it. Like there's not necessarily, I think there's always this curse that we have as women, especially, to like fix things and to make it better and to heal them and to get through them. And sometimes it's just like the awareness. And I've talked about this a little bit, but like I learned this in therapy, but I also just like really learned this in my divorce journey, was like, I just need to know what's going on in my body so I can deal with it a little bit, or just accept it, or handle it, I guess. I don't know. So first and foremost, I think knowing your triggers in this process. And this is all kind of geared towards like, how do I get through the hard? Like, and I don't mean get through like thrive, like you're just like, I'm going through a divorce and things are good. I mean, get through like literally make it to the next day without having a complete mental breakdown, which by the way, I fully did. My lowest point in my divorce, this is a side note, was in my apartment. And I don't remember like the actual trigger of like what set me off. It's sort of a side note, but it has to do with some of this. So I remember like one of the lowest points in my divorce was I was sitting in my apartment, and I got like an email from my lawyer, and she was like, the other party wants to do a full discovery. And a discovery is basically like, what we were going through was a discovery was like, hey, you have to turn over like all of your social media, all of your emails, your entire computer, your entire life basically. And at this point we had been separated, and like I had started like dating a little bit, which we had agreed upon. And like, it just felt like, I remember feeling so violated and like horrified. Not because I was doing anything sketchy, but it was like, how has my life now become like, I have to pass over my entirety of my journals, anything that I had written, and like all of this stuff. And it didn't end up coming to fruition. Like we talked through it and was like, let's not do this. Like this just seems like no means to an end, honestly. And, but I remember sitting in my apartment, and I got this email, and it was like, hey, the other party wants to do a full discovery. And every cell in my body shut down. I mean, I tell you, like, it was like my body was like, fuck this, we're out. Like, nope, not today, Satan. And I, started like uncontrollably sobbing. And my friend Ireland, like one of my very best friends, who's just like been so loyal for so many years, came over and I called her. I was like, I need help. Like, I can't stop. I had started like throwing up. I was like, my body was like in shock basically. And, it had made me sick. And Ireland came over and I sat and sobbed, and she held me in her arms. I literally sat on her lap and she held me in her arms like a baby, and I just sobbed. I had to like release all of these feelings and these emotions and like let my body process shock. It was so dark, but it was catalyzed by like this trigger, and it was like my emails and like this experience of like this violation, and it was like this just dark moment. And I came out of it, like I ended up having to go to the hospital that night, and had like IVs. Like my body fully went into shock, and she went to the hospital with me and like drove me home that night and like tucked me into bed, and or I think it was like the next morning, because I stayed over the night in the hospital. And I look back on that and I'm like, man, in the moment you feel like I'm never going to survive. And like, I look back and like that moment gives me a lot of strength, because I'm like, if I survived that, like I can survive so much. But what that leads me into is like, one of the things that I think it's really important when you're going through this process is to be aware of like, what are my triggers? Like, what is going to absolutely rock my world, send me off the edge. And like, you're going, like, you obviously don't know them. Like, okay, you want a divorce. Here's all my divorce triggers. No, like, you're going to learn these, but they're going to be recurring. And so that might be something like, what makes it worse? Like, I can get up in the morning, make my coffee, and like know that like, okay, I'm trying to get through today. Like, all I got to do, like I used to tell myself, one foot in front of the other, I have to just get through today. And then like something would happen. So like I would get an email from my lawyer, or I would see, he would post a Bible verse online or a quote, or like somebody would message me and be like, wait, what the hell, are you getting divorced? Like, I thought you guys were so like, all of these things were triggers. What reminded you of that person, or what reminds you of that like hardship, or what reminded me of my divorce? And I would start to have to figure out like, okay, am I going to avoid these triggers, or am I going to face these triggers? So I'm going to use an email. This was a really big one for me. I would get an email from my lawyer. I could be having a great day with my kids. We'd be out to dinner or like at a sports game or something. And my Gmail would pop open. I had a whole separate email for this purpose of like not getting so triggered. But my email would, it would come in and it'd be like, you have an email from your attorney, and it says like, okay, we need these 8 documents or something like that. Or like, he's requesting like this full discovery or whatever. And everything shit hit the fan. Like, everything went out the window, and it just triggered me into this place of like panic. And so from that experience, one of the things I like learned, and I tried to like over the course, divorce takes a long time. I would come up with a plan, like, okay, this is my trigger. So with emails, for example, I gave my email account and my password and everything to my mom. And I was like, I cannot do this. I have to function. I still have 5 kids to get through the day. I have a job. I have to do all of these things. I have to function. Like, I cannot be exposing myself to these triggers and like basically these grenades that just like explode my life in like 30 seconds. And so I think like figuring out like what are some of your triggers, and like either facing them and being like, okay, this isn't that big of a deal, or it's this, I'm overreacting on this because my body's going through this like traumatic response, or is it something that I can avoid? Like, how do I avoid this trigger? And so for me, it was just like passing off that duty to somebody else. Like, hey, why don't you like, so at the end of the week, my mom would make a list of like all the things that my lawyer needed, and we would sit together on FaceTime. God bless the woman. Like, she was so good to me. And we would go through and like whatever she could find, she would find, and whatever I needed to help with, like but like it took like holding my hand and walking me through that. And that's okay. Like, you have to learn to accept some of that help when you're going through like these dark, hard times. So knowing your triggers, number 1, knowing your vices, number 2. I drank a lot during my divorce, and it became a vice. And it wasn't like, oh, let's have a glass of wine at home. It was like, let's go to a bar and get like shit faced. Like, I was like, that was my vice. Ironically, I don't really drink anymore. And I think that was like part of my healing process, was like, I got to get through this. I might have like a drink on occasion, but like the last time I like was drunk was during my divorce. And it became this vice for me. My ego was a massive like vice. Like, I had this like, anything that threatened to damage my ego was just like so hard. Like, it was so hard for me. And like, whether that was like, well, you guys had this perfect marriage, or why did you have all these kids? Or like, people would ask things, and it was just like, my ego was like my vice. I was so obsessed with it. I was so married to it. And I couldn't stand when people didn't understand my heart or like misunderstood me. And then my other vice was like dating. I serial dated for a while, because it was just like, I needed something to distract me, something to get my mind off of this, something to make me feel valuable. And I don't necessarily think that vices are always bad. I just think that it's important to be aware of them. And the pendulum swings, right? Like my therapist said this at one point, and I always felt like it stuck with me, is like the pendulum is going to swing and you're going to go like, even like with me, like going to bars and stuff. She's like, you're doing that too much. That's okay. Like let your body and like let your brain, like let that be a vice and know that it's going to like swing back down. And it levels out at some point to where like where it's like, what's your norm basically. And, so I think it's just important for me dating, like if that was a vice, like I don't need to be like constantly on a dating app talking to people and feeling like that's my sense of validation. Like, so just having an awareness around that. Knowing your comforts. This is really important. For me, my comforts were my weighted blanket, Panda Express, and Grey's Anatomy. That was like my safe place in my bed with my weighted blanket. Like we need a weighted blanket sponsorship, honestly, like, because that was like it still is. This morning I had it. Like, it is truly like it's my blankie. And ordering takeout, like just being in like a safe little bubble. I think it's so important to very quickly, like when you're going through something, what is your comfort? What is your safe place? Where can you go when it's like, I need to gather myself. The kids were another thing that was like a safe place for me. I felt like they were so comforting, and I tried to be very cognizant about like not using them to like get comfort and like not, I didn't want to drag them through the mud with me, but I always felt better and like more like comforted when I had them by me and like, okay, we can get through this. Like I got to get through this. If it's not for me, it's for them. And then exercise, like off and on, was like a comfort for me. I started to kind of feel like, okay, even if I can take a walk or move my body, I would go to the gym and like do a yoga routine from like the Peloton app or something like that. But it was just moving my body became like a safe place for me. It became a comfort. And so figuring out what those are and like how can you implement them and add them into your day. Like I get it. Like a divorce for me was like a third full-time job. Like it's so much work. It's so much paperwork. I can only imagine like if you are with somebody who's like going through cancer or like doctor's appointments, all that stuff is like, it's a full-time job. Like there's no question. Anytime you're going through a traumatic event, like you have very little brain capacity to handle anything outside of your anything outside of like the necessities. And so knowing those comforts and figuring out ways to kind of add them into your day as much as you possibly can goes a really long way. Knowing your strengths. This is another one that is really hard because the moment that hits, like, I mean, the moment we filed for divorce, I was like, I am weak. I have nothing left in me. I have no strengths. I don't even know like I couldn't even comprehend feeling strength. And so I would Google like lists. I would look up lists of like affirmations on Pinterest and like what could I relate to? And I knew that like I was a hard worker. I knew that like that was a strength. I knew that I had personal belief. Like I believed in myself. And even though most days it felt like, how am I going to get through this? I knew that I was going to get through this. I knew that I'd been through other hard things. I knew that I could work through this. I was like, so I would try to find like these affirmations and try to figure out like what are my strengths in this? Like I am so weak, but like I know I have some strengths in this, and like write them down, repeat them to yourself, put them on a Post-it note, tattoo them on your body. Like I don't care what it is, but like you are going to need to remind yourself of like the strengths that you have. And ironically, the lower I got, the stronger I felt, because it was like, well, if I've gotten through this, like you guys have heard me tell this story about like losing our house. Like I remember sitting in that court or that lawyer's office that day and feeling like, this is it. Like I've lost everything. And there's a power that is associated with losing everything because you're like, I'm still here. I'm still standing. I've lost everything and I'm still standing. It can only go up from here. It's rock bottom for a reason, right? Like, okay, we've hit the low point. Like now what? And you go up from there and like you feel invincible at some point. It's like, I've gone through this. Like now what? Bring it. Like fucking bring it, universe. Like what else are you going to give me? Because guess what? I will fucking slap that bitch in the face and knock it out till Tuesday. Like you just start to feel strong, but you have to get to the rock bottom to feel those things. And so consistently reminding yourself like what are those strengths that you have and like how can they carry you through? And then the last one, probably the most important, is know your limits. We are not invincible, even though I say like you can feel like it sometimes. We're really not. And there are a lot of moments in divorce and trauma and like really hard, dark times that you have limits and you need to know what they are. Phoning a friend, you guys, it is so hard to ask for help, especially if you feel like you're that person who's like, I'm strong, I got this, I can phone a friend, like call in some help. I'll never forget that day, like that I called Ireland and I was like, I just need you. And she's like, I'll be there in 2 minutes. Like, people know when you let people in and you like that I need you, like they will be there. If you have the right people in your life, like they will be there. And you have to allow yourself to say, I'm going through something dark and I need you to be here for me. I don't actually know. And it turns out I actually need you to hold me like a baby. Like I need you to rock me like a fucking baby and wipe my tears. And like, I just need somebody. And it is okay. It is important to phone a friend or phone a family member, like whatever it is. Know your limits and know like, I can't be alone right now. Like I need some support. Turning it all off. I think like there is, this temptation to kind of constantly feel like you're checking things and you're on high alert and you're present. And like, I think this is even more like, when somebody's like on the verge of like passing away or like having like a cancer diagnosis or something like that. But like even with divorce, it's like checking in on your phone and like making sure your kids are okay and like making sure that you're not missing something. Like sometimes you just have to turn it all off. Know your limits. Know when it's like, I need to book myself a massage at the spa, or I need to just like turn it all off, turn on a movie on my TV, lock my phone in the other room and just like have a moment of like, it's going to be okay. Like we can turn off all of the outside forces and just let it be for a minute. Medication. This is like something that I know is very taboo. I always have like shared online, especially about like a natural lifestyle and all these things. And I think there's so many things mentally and like physically you can do that don't involve medication, but sometimes you need medication and you have to know your limits. I got to a place where I was like, I don't have a will to live. That's it. Like I don't, and that, like, I remember saying that to my mom and she's like, it's time. Like I'm begging you and pleading you, please like get on some medication. And I'm so grateful I did because it truly like changed the trajectory of my life and allowed me to kind of get through this process, in some like sort of, fashion that I can look back on and be like, okay, I did it. And it allowed me to be a parent for my kids more than anything. Like I was not thriving as a mother in this time. And so I think like knowing your limits and knowing like when is okay to be like, I'm pushing through and when is okay to be like, I need some help. Like I need some support. I need something, a medical intervention, whether that is like, you're dehydrated and you need to go to the hospital and get some fluids, or you need an anxiety medicine or depression medicine or whatever it is. Knowing your limits as far as passing the torch. This is another one that it's like, again, like I said with my emails, like pass the torch there. It's okay. Like if you need childcare, if you need somebody that's, hey, I cannot handle feeding my kids. Can you please, like, I'm passing the torch. I'm asking for help. Can you please, like, can you drop some dinner off? Like people want to help. The people in your life that love you and that care about you want to be there for you. They want to support you. They want to walk alongside you. Let them help you. And then last but not least, surrendering. I think there's a phrase that floats around the internet and it's very like cliche, but it's like what you resist persists. And there's so much resistance that happens, especially in divorce, where it's like, I'm not going to let my house go. I'm not going to let this amount of money go. I want this amount of child support. I want this. Just surrender. At some point you have to be like, thy will be done. Let it happen. Let it be as it's meant to be. And like, trust that like you've come this far, you can overcome whatever is next. And when I surrendered myself in my divorce and, whether it was about the house and the finances or just like the process, and like, there was a moment where I was like, I surrendered to like people accepting or people knowing that like, I'm the bad guy. I wanted this divorce. I fought that logic and like that reality for so long that was like, well, he behaved this way and I behaved this way. And like, like this, it's okay. I surrendered to the fact that like, I chose this. My ex-husband didn't want a divorce. He didn't want this marriage to end. He was the one who was trying to make it work. I wasn't. I was done. And like, that was a hard pill for me to swallow. It was a hit to my ego. It was a hit to my reputation. It was like, I felt misunderstood, all of those things. And when I surrendered, it was like, all right, now what? Okay. Like now we move on. Like now we move forward. So again, knowing your limit. I think the overall experience with my divorce and like some of these feelings is there's an awareness that has to happen. And there's also a surrendering that has to happen. And I think that knowing some of these things, knowing your vices, knowing your comforts, knowing your weaknesses, your strengths is very important. But at the end of the day, like what's the most important is just like getting through it, one foot in front of the other. And I know that it feels impossible. I know that it feels scary. so daunting. But there will be a moment in time where you look back and you're like, holy shit, I don't know what had just happened. I feel like I just woke up from a slumber and like somehow I got through this and here I am. And you might not be where you wanted to be. You might be living in a 1,400 square foot house with 5 kids and 2 bedrooms and shit gets real tight. But let me tell you what, you made it through and like it's only up from there. So hopefully that helps. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Summer of Me, and I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for listening to The Summer of Me. You can listen to episodes on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can watch on YouTube. Come hang out and follow my chaos on Instagram @KendraForNow. See you next time.